What's good, YouTube? This is your boy Elf. I'm back here with another video. And today what I'm going to be talking about is the two biggest issues, in my opinion, when you're a property investor and you're managing your own properties. Let's get into it. Now, I'm going to be real with you guys. As you're starting out as a property investor, not all of us have, the resources enough to actually hire a property manager who's going to run our properties. So what I actually am faced with is all of my properties are actually managed myself. I outsource here and there, but what I'm going to be talking about is the two biggest issues that I face and what are the solutions that one can do to actually get over these issues. Now, before we start, please remember that none of my videos constitute as financial advice or legal advice. If you need any of these, please contact an accountant, a financial advisor, or a lawyer to give you more information. Now, the first thing is around rent collection, guys. So rent collection must be the worst hurdle to get over, where you have tenants who are not paying you on time, who are actually giving you issues when it comes to rent collection. This is the most common headache for property investors and in particular property managers. So what I do before we even get started, I look into the type of property that I want to invest in. Now, I've heard people say, I don't want to invest in property because, people might not pay you. But let's be real with this. You can put systems in place to ensure that your tenants pay you on time. You can choose the right type of asset that ensures that your risk of default is actually reduced. Now, under my portfolio, I'm talking about multi-let properties. So, there's a difference between a single family home and also a multi-let property. The main difference is that a single family home, you're only dependent on one tenant to actually pay your rent so that you can pay your mortgage. Whereas on a multi-let, you actually have up to 10 tenants who are going to be paying you rent so that you can pay your mortgage. The reason I like multi-let is, number one, it gives me a higher rate of return on my investment. And number two, the risk of default is lower. If one or two tenants don't pay you on time, you are not feeling stressed or left out in the dark on how you're going to be paying your bank. Now, the other thing that I would do, guys, once you've got a multi-let, you want to actually put a contract in place with the tenant whereby in that lease, you specify an interest element on late payments. Now, what this is going to do is going to disincentivize your tenant from paying late. And if they happen to pay late, it's going to then increase the income that you get because you'll be charging them interest. Now, as a general rule, interest on a lease contract can be applied, but what you cannot do is penalize your tenant for paying late. Third thing that I do with rental collection is when a tenant does not pay me on time, I keep constant communication. I keep constant interaction with the tenant to basically call them and let them know that they need to pay me on time. Eventually, when a creditor comes knocking on your door, you're eventually going to crave. Now, this will annoy the tenant because every time you call them or you knock on their door requesting your rent, they will eventually cave. Another thing that you can do as you're checking in with your tenant is to find out what are the reasons that the tenant is not paying you. In my case, I had a tenant who was actually taking 3 months off to go and study, and the employer was basically not paying this tenant. But because I had upfront communication with the tenant, we were able to draw up a payment plan in which it outlines when the tenant needs to pay me and how much interest is being incurred and how much he needs to pay me. The fourth and final thing that you can do is basically before someone moves in, request that they pay a deposit upfront. What this is going to do is that it's going to do two things. Number one, when the person pays the deposit together with the rent, this gives you an indication that they can afford the place. Number two, when they default on rent, you can then withhold the deposit for use to pay off your bond. Now, I used to be desperate and allow my tenants to move in without paying a deposit. Don't fall into this trap, guys. You need to have a deposit in place so that it gives you enough time to actually recover the funds from the tenant. Now, I know I said that was the fourth and last step, but the fifth step, if everything doesn't work, is you now need to actually file for eviction. Now, there are two companies that I've contacted around the eviction process. One of them is SSLR and the other one is Xpelo. They've gone and summarized to me what the eviction process entails. A letter of demand is going to be sent out to the tenant demanding that they pay rent within 7 to 20 days depending on the agreement that you've entered with them. Number two, should the tenant not pay the rent after the letter of demand, you can proceed and cancel the lease, which then will put the tenant on illegal occupation of your property. If they still don't want to vacate the property after you've canceled the lease, then you will need to move forward to apply for an eviction order at the court. Now, in terms of the costs, unopposed evictions will range around 30,000, whereas opposed evictions will go up to 60,000. Now, remember that these are estimates and you would actually need to find out what the actual costs are from your lawyer because it will vary on a case-by-case basis. Now, the second thing that is an issue for property managers who are also property investors is that you have to maintain your property in terms of the law. Now, the Rental Housing Act of 2014 states that the landlord must provide a tenant with a dwelling that is habitable and must maintain the existing structure of the dwelling and, where possible, facilitate the provision of basic services of dwelling. It means that you should actually provide a dwelling or a structure or a room to your tenant that does not affect their health, their safety, or is not falling apart. Now, that on its own is enough, but I have seen cases where a tenant will come up to me to request that I maintain their property, and what they're asking me to maintain is actually not something that is meeting what the legal requirements are. They'll ask me to maintain things like help them with their DSTV installation or probably paint the room, whereas it's not clearly visible that there's any defects on the paint. Now, what I've actually gone and done is I have installed burglar bars and fixed windows that are actually letting air seep in at night. These are issues that make the property uninhabitable. But as I mentioned before, if you draft a contract wherein you mention your responsibilities as a landlord, any maintenance issues that are brought about by the tenant should actually be on the tenant's account. Now, let's speak about who fixes these issues. For me, I actually will go in and do an inspection and probably will fix the issue myself. If it's as small as just changing, a door lock or fixing the light bulb. But if you can't, then you would need to actually hire someone who's going to help you with these. It's good that you create a long-standing relationship with your maintenance person. And it's important that you actually don't get maintenance people who are going to rip you off in terms of the quality of the work that they do or the price that they charge you. With all things being said, you also don't want to wait for too long to attend to a maintenance issue, such as a water leakage, because this will dent the expenses that you're going to have to pay to the council for the water wastage. Now, another thing that I do is basically just to contact my insurance. Guys, everyone who applies for a bond and buys a property through a bank will be asked to take out insurance on the structure of the building. And what this covers, it covers any structural damages that can happen to the building, any wall leaks or any roof leaks, or it can even cover the geyser when it's burst. Now, in these cases, it's good to call the insurance and have them send out a qualified maintenance company to come and attend to these issues. Now, that's about it, guys. I hope you found value in all of these tips that I've given you guys. If you have, please like and subscribe to my channel, comment below, and I'll see you on the next video.